Welcome back to ClickFunnels Quick Start Blueprint. This is Dan Havey with CFninjaHacks. And in the last two videos, we took a look at some of the elements inside of the editor. First off, we started off with all of our text elements. Then we did all of our media elements. And now in video number 3, we are going to go through the forms, which pretty much consists of the buttons and the input elements on the page. So we're going to start off with our button, and let's just pull one into place. So now let's just click on the gear and we'll go into the settings. And as always, you can just start off with your top margin. And then we're going to come back to the set action here in a minute. Right in this blank here, you're going to put in the main text that you want for the button. And then below that, you can put in whatever subtext you would like for the button. You can put in an ARIA label, which may or may not help with SEO, but mostly it's used for somebody I do believe has some sort of disabilities and they have a reader. I think it's for people who are hearing impaired, something like that. Of course, right here now we can also set our font family and our font size, our mobile size, and our subtext. We can set the size there as well as the mobile size. And I'm going through this quickly because we've seen this in just about every other element there is on the page. Then, of course, we can set our text color and then also our background color down here at the bottom. Now, like many of these, we have a bunch of themes we can pick from. You can have a simple pill with rounded edges, some light green button, orange. Obviously, you can see a lot of different ones here, some with borders, some with shadows. So just go through, check out the ones you want, and see if they'll fit within your theme. And then, of course, once you put it in, the theme you put in, you can come back to your settings and you can make some slight changes. Let's say we need to change this background color a little bit. We want it more like that, but we want to keep the borders. So that's a good way to get a button with some special functions on it, some special shadows, some special borders. And then you just come in and just kind of make the background color whatever you need it to be. Same thing with the text color, of course. You can make that whatever you would like. And that's getting pretty ugly there. So now we can go into our advanced and we can look at different size buttons. So with button width here is fluid to begin with. And that means it's basically going to be the width of whatever text is inside plus whatever padding is around it. But we can also make it fill width, where it'll go and will fill up the entirety of its bounding element. In this case here, the bounding element would be this column. So it'll take up the entire width of the column minus whatever padding is on the sides of it. So let's just set that back to fluid. And then we can stay with display block, or we can go display inline, which will always put it over to the left-hand side. I usually leave it on display block. Then we can do custom, which is currently on, or we can do a flat line. And if you do a flat line, you can see what it did is it took out the background color. But now let's come down and let's say we want our text color to be red, and we want our background color to be black. Now you're going to see what it did is it made the text here black and the border around the outside black as well. But once we save it and then preview the page, you'll see what happens here is when you hover into it, then it will change out the colors. So the text that was black turns white, and the dark background, or the background that had been white, now turns dark. Now in this case here, let's come back to this. We're going to see, okay, we did have black and we did have white. So did it change the text color? I thought I had set that to red. So it's not going to let me set that text color, is it? So apparently in this case here, if you do this, you get black text and then whatever background color you wanted. So let's make this blue and let's save this element, and then we will reload this. And let's see what we get this time. We should have, oops, let me try this again, reload the page. And it's not working, so let's save it again. And you'll run into this problem more often than you'd like, where it does not quite work right. There we go. Now we got our blue. And so whatever color is the border and the original text color is what the background will become on hover. Now I use this quite a bit actually, but I use it with like black and white buttons on a on a black background, or if I do it on a white background, I'll put a shadow around it, and it actually turns out into a pretty decent effect. So then we have our vertical spacing. So that would be putting more padding at the top and the bottom. We have horizontal spacing, which will put padding on either end of it. And of course, we can, like always, set our corner radiuses. And here we got a bunch of different options as far as what we want the border to look like. And in fact, let me come back here and change this to custom. Otherwise, I don't think this is going to work. So we got here borders. We can do 2 at the bottom and 3. But let's change some colors around here so this looks a little bit better. So white there. And let's make it a red background. Now you can see the bottom here. We got a border down here that is 3 pixels. And the sides are 2 pixels, but let's go here. So now we have 1 pixel around there and then 3 pixels at the bottom. And of course you can do none or 1 or up to 10. So let me see here. Box shadow, got different ones. We can do a blurry shadow, and you can do a hard shadow, and all the rest of them here. So just play around with them, see which ones you like. This one here is highlight on hover only. I will put that on. Let's save this. And then we will reload the page. And so now what happens is I hover in here, you see the red becomes just slightly lighter, or there's a little bit of a whiteness put in there. So that's a good effect too. But like a lot of times with the buttons here, if you really want to get into a little bit more crazy effects, shadows and things like that, you're going to need to use a little bit of custom CSS in order to put that in there. There's plenty of places you can learn CSS. So we got our box shadow. Now we can put in some text shadow. So let's say we want a far shadow or a blurry shadow. And then we got text transform. We can go all uppercase, lowercase, or just capitalize the first letter of each word except for the very first word. And let me see here. We got that. So icon pickers. With a button, unlike the text elements, with a button, you can put an icon at the beginning of the button and at the end of the button, or more accurately, the beginning and end of the first line. So let's just click on any one. So this was our beginning button. That one's kind of weird. Let's put in this one here. So that's beginning button, and then, I'm sorry, icon, and then here is the icon after the text. So you can have one on either side. And if you want to put a little extra space on either end, just come into the text itself and put in a little extra space. And you see here that S got to be a large S once we put that space in there. And for some reason now, this icon is not showing up. There we go. Just need to put it back in. Okay, so we got our icons, and then we have our button effect. Now again, I tend to not use any of these. We can do a pulse glow effect. I don't know if we're going to see that on the screen. We could do a rocking effect, and we can do a bouncing effect. Now that will just continue all the time, or we can only do it on hover. So let's do elevate on hover. Let's just save this. We will reload the page, and then as we hover over it, it just moves up a little bit, and we still have it so that it also becomes a little bit lighter when you hover over it. So a couple of different effects there that you have available to you. And then, of course, we can do our right, center, left, like all the other elements on the page. So now let's go back into the settings and let's take a look at setting our action, because this is really the most important part of a button, is having it do some sort of an action once you click on it. You want it to submit the page, or you want it to go somewhere, or you want it to scroll somewhere on the page or do something else. And that's where we set all of that right in here. Now, I will make the caveat right now that whenever you're doing anything in ClickFunnels, if you're doing an opt-in page, if you're doing an order form, anything like that, if you are going to submit the content, you're going to save it to the contact database, you have to include an input form for the email address, because that's how it stores all the contacts into ClickFunnels, is based upon somebody's email address. It's really their unique identifier. And so because of that, you'd have to make sure you put it in. Now, we'll look at the inputs here in a minute, but just remember that as we're going forward, you have to always put in an email address if you want to save it. So the first thing we can do here is we can submit submit the order form, or submit a form, or submit the page, or submit whatever content is on the page is what this really says. So again, in that case there, you'd have to have an email input, and then you'd have to have a button saying, okay, when I click this button, save that email and whatever other information you have on the page to ClickFunnels contact database. Now, also the built-in function is that when you click that, it will take them to the next page in the funnel. So no matter where you are in the funnel, it's always going to take them to the next page in the funnel unless you set something in the general settings. So let's click out of here and let's go into our general settings. And here it says on submit go to. So you got somebody in a form, and if they click a certain button, let's say you got 2 different buttons on a page, and you say, okay, well, if they click button number 1, you want them to go to the next step in the funnel. But if they click button number 2, you want them to go over to another funnel. You want them to go to a webinar page. You want them to go to Calendly and sign up for something. There's a lot of, you can send them anywhere you want. And if you're going to have them go somewhere else you want after submitting the form, now again, this is just purely for when you submit the form. If you want them to go somewhere without submitting the form, you just put in a hyperlink either on some text or you could do it on a button, you could do it on an image. A lot of places you can just put in basic hypertext, but this is where you submit the page and you want them to go somewhere other than the next page in the funnel. You put that URL right here and it will take them to the next page in the funnel. I'm sorry, it will take them to somewhere other than the next page in the funnel. So let me see how that was set the action there. So we can also open the pop-up. So you click on the button, boom, the pop-up opens. We talked about how to build out the pop-up and work with that when we went through, I guess it was the very first video when we went through the settings and the pop-ups over here on the top left side. Next thing here is you can do a Facebook opt-in. Now I'll tell you, you probably will never use this, and I don't really think you should, because what it does is it saves your customers' Facebook information to the ClickFunnels application. So when you set up a Facebook opt-in, you create an app inside of Facebook, and then when somebody opts in, their name gets added to your list inside of Facebook. Now there is a way to do this, create your own app and save it and keep the information for yourself. I wrote some code for that a number of years ago. If somebody's interested in it, maybe I'll dust it off and get it out to the public, maybe sell it for a couple of bucks. But for the most part, don't use a Facebook opt-in unless you want to help ClickFunnels build their list, because it will not help you build yours. So we can go to a website URL when we click on the button. And so again, if you want to go to any website, you just put in HTTP wherever you want to send them to. You put that right in here. And then you can decide, do I want to open this in the same window, or do I want to open that in a new window? And then as we saw before, you could put in a hashtag here. And if you put in a hashtag, you can also then put in certain short codes afterwards. And as we saw when we were looking at the images, you can put in that you want to, once again, you could submit the form if you wanted to. You could open the pop-up. You could close a pop-up. And again, you would only really close the pop-up if you're already inside the pop-up and you click the button and then you close the pop-up. And then you can also scroll to somewhere on the page. So it says here scroll title. So let me show you how that one works, because we went over the others earlier. So you just put in CROLL dash. Now we got to get the data title for where we want to scroll them to. So let's click on this and let's come down to the bottom, and this section down here I named bottom. So let's come back up to our button, set our action, go to the URL. Okay, didn't take it. So we go scroll dash title, and I need a hashtag there, not a 3. So we'll go hashtag, click our back button, let's click save. And if we did this all right and it saved it, what's going to happen when I click on this is going to slowly scroll me down to the bottom of the page. And by slowly, I mean in about 1/10 of a second. Okay, so something did not take. And let me see here. Go to website URL. Yeah, still having a problem. So scroll dash bottom. Let's try this again. We're going to open the same window, of course, save it, and let's click preview. Now let's see what happens. There we go. See, it slowly scrolls you down there, and like I said, by slowly, it's like a quarter to half a second before it scrolls you down to the bottom of the page. Now, there's a different way you can scroll to the bottom where it doesn't really scroll you, it just jumps you down there. And you can do that by grabbing a hold of the CSS ID selector, and let's go back to the button. And so instead of saying to scroll dash bottom, we're just going to plunk in that CSS ID selector, and we will save this and preview the page. And what it'll do is when you click on the button now, see, it didn't move, it just popped you right there. I prefer the scroll, but sometimes you may want to use it where you just pop right down into place. So let's take a look at what else we have in our section here. We can go to the next funnel step, but as it says right here, this does not submit your form. So it's great, go to the next funnel step, but again, if you want to save the contact information, you definitely want to use your submit order, submit form at the top here. So we can also do a scroll to row or section, which again is pretty much what we already showed with the short tag or the short code. So we'll just put in here, we're going to scroll to the section called bottom section. And I don't think I pointed it out, but on every one of the buttons, when you change the action, it'll always show you what the action is right here. So if you get a red warning box right there, you know that it has not been set properly. So we'll just come in here, let's reload this page, scroll back up to the top, and in that case there, see, it gives you another smooth scroll down to the bottom of the page. And then let's see what else we have. We got one left. Okay, we can hide and show actions here. So let's take a look here. I think I already have this row hidden. Let's manage rows. Okay, so here I have a hidden row. So headline row, I'm going to hide that so that when the button is clicked, the headline row will show. And then this section right here, we want to hide this section. So we're going to show the text and we're going to hide this section when the button is clicked. So we're going to come in and we're going to say show. So let's scroll down here. Here's our row, headline row. So we're going to show that. And then we are going to hide what is the second section here. So we're going to hide that. And we will save this, and once again we will preview, click the button, and boom. So here came in that row which has a headline inside of it, and the section disappeared. Let me just reload this one more time. Boom, there you go. Now a lot of times you'll use this like on an order form page or something. When somebody's ready to buy, you'll have them click a button, you'll hide part of the page, and then you'll show the order form on the page. So it's actually something that you're going to probably use more often than you might think. So let's see here on the button. I do believe we have everything handled on the button. So the next element we would go to is, let's just add an element here by hovering over it, click the plus. Next one on our hit parade is the Facebook opt-in, which this does the exact same thing as had you set it under the actions. And again, my suggestion would be you don't use this unless you want to help Russell build his list, because it will not build your list. Okay, so the next element we'll take a look at is our input element, and we'll just open this up. Again, we got our margin at the top. This currently says it's not set, so we can set it to anything we want. We can do a full name, first name, last name, etc., etc. Here we can do a custom type down at the bottom, and we'll look at that in a minute. But the one you're going to use most of the time, again, is going to be the email address, because that's what you need to have in order to submit anything on the page. So we have here set our type of email address. And the placeholder text can be whatever you would like. That's what's going to show right here inside of the element. And as soon as we clicked on email address, it turned this to required, and there's no way you can click it and change it. If we go to last name, then you can decide whether you want it required or not. But the email address is always required if you're going to submit the page. Of course, we can change our font, we can change our font size, and we can change our mobile. Now here we have different themes again, different borders, different shadow on it. So come through and decide which one you would like to use, and let's just pick that one right there. And then we can go to advanced, and it's like, do you want bold? Do you want normal text? Do you want it left, right, center? Again, normally you do left. Put some corners on it. On submit, this one here you want to turn off. Submit on enter. They really should have this set to off all the time, because otherwise somebody's in here and they type in their email address and they hit the return button, it will actually submit this page. So if you have a bunch of other blanks that you're having people fill out, but you're not saying that they're required, that information isn't going to go in. You only want the page submitted really when somebody clicks on the button. So we can change the background color. Let's say we want a light gradient on there. Do we want our email icon? Of course, you have name, phone, and address as well. And then we can do what color do we want. Let's make that our black color. And you want it left or right. Again, normally you see it on the right-hand side. So normally this is pretty much what it's going to look like most of the time when you have this set up if you put in that icon. So now normally how you'll see a page is you'll have your input for your email up here, and then you'll have a button down below it. Now let's go in and let's make this button a little bit more realistic. Join my cool thing we'll put in here, and we'll get rid of the subtext. And then what else do we want to do? Let's get rid of some of those icons. Let's just get rid of the second one. And anytime you want to get rid of an icon, you just come in here, you click on it, and you click on the little garbage can, and the icon will go away. And in this case here, let's turn this into an arrow. And there we go. Join my cool thing. So now we have our email address, and we have our name or our button right here to submit it. Right now I have it hide show. So let's say we want to come in here and change that. We're going to submit this because we're going to have somebody opt in. And then also, let's say we want to collect their name at the same time. So let's just move this one above. And then we're going to say, give them full name. We can change our placeholder here. Enter your full name. And let's say that is required as well. Now, as we start building out this form, there's usually other things you do in here, and one of them is a lot of times you will put in labels. So let's just do this. Let's put in a subheadline element, and here we'll just say email above this, and now let's go into the settings. And we don't need that to be nearly that big, but we're going to turn it bold here in a minute. Let's make it 16, and then, okay, I think everything else for the most part, whoops, not there. Want to click on this, we want to float it to the left, and we want to make it all bold. Could probably even be a little bit smaller, and then we'll come into this, come into this element right here, and we will change the amount of margin we have. So now let's make that, yeah, well, let's make it 10, because we got a little bit of shadow there, so let's do that. Now let's duplicate this element, and we'll pull it up on top of this one, and here we're going to say full name. So there we got our full name being input, we have our blank, we have our email address, and we have our button. So now if somebody were to click on this button, it would submit the page, and it would save their full name and their email. And I'm going to get rid of this hover effect. This is driving me nuts. So there we have that so far. Now let's go ahead and look at what is the next element, and that is our select box element. So let's just click on that and open it up. And again, we have margin at the top, and now we're going to say here we want to set our input type. And here, so you got countries and states and that kind of stuff. So let's just say we're going to do all countries to begin with. And then we can put our input name, because this is what's going to be in the database associated with whatever value we come up with. So it's going to say, in this case here, let's just say we're going to have it say country, and then after that, the value of the country will be United States or whatever country we pick. And again, we can make it required or not, and text size, etc. And again, like some of the others, we have the ability to put in a theme. So let's just pick that one. We can change our font weight to bold. We can do our icon. So that's talking about this little icon right here. Let's just say we can do a carrot with a square around it, a chevron with a circle. So you got a bunch of different ones here, up, down arrow. We can change the size of the corners, and we already had a gradient on it. So one apparently is at the bottom and one apparently is at the top. And so that's under advanced and our settings. So let's just save this real quick and take a look at what that does. Reload the page. So here we're starting to build out our form. Might want to tighten up the spacing right there a little bit. But we click on this, and then we can pick any country we want. And then once we submit the page, because we have the email address on the page, it'll save everything to the database, and it'll give us an additional element at the bottom that will say country, United States. And so now we'll come back into this element, because what we can also do is, instead of setting up states and countries and stuff, we can put in custom options, and we can change what our custom input name is. And so let's just say here color. We're going to make a bunch of different t-shirts with different colors, and then we're going to have our value. So we're going to give it our value. Now the value is going to be what is stored in the database. The text is going to be what shows on the screen. So in this case here, let me do it this way. I'm going to put a 1 here. I'm going to hit a tab. Oh, tabs don't work in here, I forgot. And we're going to type in 1. Now we're going to say we want to add a new option. And so this time here, we're going to type in the number 2, and we're going to put a 2 over here on the right-hand side. And the reason I'm doing that is just to show you then what the difference is going to be on the screen. Again, we have our required or not, font and the size and everything else we had the same as before. So now let us save this, and then we will preview this item. So now what we can do on our drop down, and what happens I find is that every time you set this up, whatever you put in this first one here, for some reason it gets wiped out. I don't know if I'm doing something wrong or what it is, but it gets wiped out. And so you have to come back in, and I wasn't paying attention really as I did it, if it got wiped out when I added the second one or what exactly happened. But just be aware of that. It's not a big deal. You just got to go and put it back in. So let's reload the page. See, now it says 1 right here, and then the second one is 2. So now let's put my email address back in here, and then we're going to just save this. So we had 1 here as the text that's showing on the page, and then we had 1, the number 1, as a value. So let's say here we're going to join my cool thing. It'll take us to the next page in the funnel, which is exactly what this did. Now I'm going to pause for a second, because I'm going to go out and I'm going to find where that is inside of the database and show you what it stored when we clicked on the word that said 1. So here we are inside of my contact, inside the ClickFunnels contact database, and right down here, so we have color and we have the number of 1. So let's come back in here and see what we set up. We called this input name color, and we had the value of 1. So this is what it has as the top up here, and I'm drawing a complete blank on what that is known as, because the bottom one is the value. The top one, like I said, I'm drawing a blank. I'm sure it'll come to me in a second. What they call the placeholder, I'll just call it for now. But we stored the value of 1. So always remember that it will store the value, not the, in this case here, they're calling it the text. So that's what it would do, is store the value under the input name of color right there. So let's see here now. So if we're building this out as an input, we're just going to put another one here. Let's grab this. Let us clone that element, drag it down into place, And in this case here, okay, we got a little too much padding or margin at the top of this one. And so we just call this one color. Obviously 1 and 2 have nothing to do with color, but we will just put that in. Okay, so we got one more element in our input here. Okay, so let's see what other elements we have. Let's scroll down. We did these top 4 already, so let's go to our text area, and we will open this up as well. Not set. We can go to custom type is the only one we have available, and it's called custom type, but let's just say so it's whatever we're going to ask somebody to put in here. Let's say they have the answer to some sort of a question, and then we can say enter your answer here. I mean, it could be a comment, it could be whatever you want them to have, and whether it's required or not, you can decide that. We have our themes, once again, like we've had before, and again, advanced, where do we want to align, the font weight, etc., just like all the other elements. And then I really think that's it for the settings for this one here. So let's move it up here. Again, we can clone our text element, drop that down into place so we can have some text there. Pull this up a little bit tighter. Put in, obviously, whatever label you want there. And again, you don't need to put in labels because you have the placeholder, so you don't really need the labels. So let us save that and reload the page. We can't reload that page. Let's reload this page. It should give us everything. All right, so here we have all of our inputs, and right down here at the bottom, we can change this. We got the little thing down here, the couple little lines, so your consumer can move this around. They click in here, and of course, they type in whatever information they wanted to provide to you. And then we got one more thing in this section. Let's come here. Let's click on the plus. Scroll down, checkbox headline. Let's open that up. So it defaults to being required. And so you're going to want somebody to check this box to agree to something. You could put in here some text that says, I agree that I've read your privacy policy. So, we can have privacy policy in here. Whatever you want it to say, I agree to your terms of service. I agree to GDPR stuff over in Europe, if that applies. I don't know anything about GDPR, so that may not apply. So you just change the text by typing in here, and then we go inside, and we got contact field. Probably just leave this as accepted terms. So saying that this person accepted whatever terms you are creating here. Do you want to show this to people in Europe only? And so there it will figure out geographically, are they in Europe by geo-targeting, and then they will show that or not. And again, like everything else, we got text color, bold, background. So you can make the background yellow if you want. We can make the text black, and we could make it bold if we wanted to. An icon color, we don't have any icons in there yet, but we could. Border color, I don't think we'll put a border around it. Opacity, you can put in your font and your content headline or your other, like we had earlier when we were working with our text elements. And then again here, it's being treated pretty much just like a text element. So let's give it a line height. We'll give it the text transform. We'll leave that alone. Spacing, we can change that. Shadow, we'll leave that alone. We could put in an icon here if we want. So let's just say, let's put in the little wheelchair, handicapped thing. That signifies something. No, in fact, let's do this. Let's put in warning. Oh, we got to put in the skull and crossbones. I mean, come on. This is a warning here, so we got to put that in. We can put, let's say we want some 10 pixels of padding around this thing. We can change our radius, border, everything else. We got our, let's put a drop shadow around it, make that thing really stand out there to really give people the idea that this is a significant warning that they have to deal with. So how this works then is if you make this required, you're not able to submit the page until that thing is checked. So let's click on save, and you can put it above the button, below the button, wherever you would like. Let's just leave it where it is for now. You get the idea. You can move it around. And so let's reload the page. And so I have all my contact information in here. And now let's say, join my cool thing. and oops, didn't work. Now you see also put a red banner, a red border around the outside of that. So now let's click on it, took the red border away, click on the button itself, everything turned green. You saw there for a second. You had green borders around all of the input elements, submitted it, and took us to the next page in the funnel. So that is it for that group of elements. Next up, we will be looking at our, let's see here, our advanced forms in the next video. As always, any questions, let me know.